of a Salton Sea restoration. We have several reasons for this view. First, it has the potential to disrupt the QSA, which brought peace to the Colorado River in California when the era of California's annual limit of 4.4 million acre-feet arrived. There would not have been any quantification of the agricultural priorities without the related transfers and acquisitions of conserved water. They were a package deal.
But isn't the restoration a piece of that too?
The restoration was not an obligation that was linked to the QSA. In fact, the legislature separated the two. It provided that the QSA parties would contribute, there would be the 15 years of water to the Salton Sea to give the state time to plan, and then they would contribute $30 million to the Salton Sea Restoration Fund. Coachella has already paid in its full share of $8 million. That was the seed money for the Resources Agency to do the studies. And the legislature after that said, we're not responsible for the restoration, it's the responsibility of the state. They delinked the transfers from the restoration, put the restoration on a separate process. They provided for a study to be done and then left it to the legislature to make the final decisions on whether to go forward with the project, how much money to spend on the project. The legislature declared its intent to carry out a restoration, and we would hope that the state would do so, but it's not at the expense of the QSA transfers. I would also note that the QSA agreements do provide for the environmental impacts of the transfers to be mitigated and fully funded. The water districts contribute in $2,003. It's actually closer to $300 million in nominal dollars. For mitigation, the state picks up the rest. Mitigation that's been done so far, in addition to the mitigation water, there's been a managed marsh project, phase 1 and phase 2. There has the air quality monitoring stations have been installed, and pilot projects are now underway. There's a schedule in the mitigation monitoring plan of all of the activities that have to be done for mitigation. And the QSA JPA annually prepares a budget for the activities to be done for the coming year. They work with an implementation team, IID, Department of Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to determine what specific activities need to be done each year. So the bureaucracy is in place and ongoing and funded to make sure the mitigation does get done. Finally,
can I ask you a question before
yes.
before you're final? Do you feel the urgency that was talked about earlier? I mean, do you think that we really are on a crash landing here, 2 more years, and then real problems start?
The mitigation water ends at the end of 2017. At that point, the sea will begin to recede due to the QSA transfers. The recession that's occurred already is due to the lack of surplus flows into Mexico and the drier climate conditions we've had in the past decade. At that point, air quality issues are going to start coming to the forefront. That could be expensive. We don't know exactly how severe the problems will be. That's one of the reasons the air quality monitoring stations have been installed, so you figure out where the problem is and then figure out what you need to do to solve the particular problems. The state's ultimately on the hook once the district's contributions are exhausted. It may very well be in the state's best interest to get a restoration plan in place sooner. And if for some reason they get a restoration plan in place, it eliminates the need for the QSA parties to do mitigation. The leftover money actually gets paid into the Salton Sea Restoration Fund. That's part of the QSA JPA agreement. The final point I want to make is CVWD reaffirms its longstanding view that matters relating to the distribution of Colorado River water in California are within the exclusive authority of the Secretary of Interior's contracting power under the Boulder Canyon Project Act. We're not waiving that objection by appearing here. We sidestepped that issue through the protest dismissal agreement.
Decide that somewhere.
Yeah. While CVWD opposes the specific relief that IID seeks, it remains willing to participate through the Salton Sea Authority in discussions to determine the most effective way to restore the Salton Sea, and I'll be happy to answer any questions the board has. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next panel, Imperial County Farm Bureau, Lindsay Dale, Executive Director, Imperial Valley Vegetable Growers Association, which I now hear is VEG, the veg growers. I didn't realize, that sounds like something my husband would say. Wheeler Morgan, and then Farm Worker Institute for Economic and Leadership Development, David Villarino Gonzalez, and Latino Water. Oh yeah, I didn't see him. All right. Great, and you're scheduled for 20 minutes. I'm going to give you 15,
Okay.
if you don't mind, just in the, again, the community we're trying to build spirit here.
Sure. We'll try.
Thanks.
First of all, I want to take an opportunity to wish everyone a National Ag Day. Happy National Ag Day.
Yeah, thank you.
I think we all forgot about that today. My name is Lindsay Dale. I'm the Executive Director of Imperial County Farm Bureau, and I am also a fourth-generation Imperial Valley native raising a fifth-generation. I represent approximately 660 members consisting of agricultural producers, landowners, and farm service providers. The agricultural industry in Imperial County produces more than 100 different crops on about 500,000 acres of farmable land. Farmers and ranchers in Imperial Valley are deeply concerned about the consequences of the state's failure to restore the Salton Sea. We are part of one of the most productive agricultural regions in the nation. And if I can deviate from my prepared statements real quick, earlier today you asked some questions specifically about the crops that we grow, and I happen to have a copy of the 2013 crop report in front of me, so I'll just read off the top 10 real quick for your benefit. Number 1 was cattle, followed by alfalfa, head lettuce, broccoli, leaf lettuce, Bermuda grass, carrots, onions, sugar beets, and Sudan grass. And there was also a question regarding the forage crops that we grow. 70% of the forage crops that we grow in Imperial County are used domestically for beef cattle and dairies that produce the milk and cheese and the ice cream that I love.
I know, I sort of point that out when people like to pick on alfalfa. And then the next
Exactly.
question is, do you like ice cream?
Exactly,
Right.
yes. We all have to remember where our food originates. Imperial County farmers are responsible, along with Yuma County, for supplying approximately 95% of the winter vegetables that our nation consumes. However, our livelihood and everyone's food supply is in jeopardy if nothing's done to address the looming crisis at the sea. The amount the sea has declined over the past 2 years has hit historical records, and the trend thus far is looking to continue. In 2014, the sea declined approximately 1 foot. This is even with the QSA mandated 90,000 acre feet of water of mitigation water that was being added to the sea. We believe that there are very many reasons for this decline, including efficiencies by both IID water deliveries and the water users as well. Effective water management tools by farmers have most definitely added to the decline of the sea. However, many of these efforts have not yet been compensated for. In addition, early studies showed farmers practicing good management practices as mandated by your own very TMDL program that we have, and that reduced their drain water, thus adding further to the decline of the sea. It was obvious to most that the result of the QSA implementation, the sea would recede. However, I highly doubt that anyone thought that it would recede at the rate that it has. Mitigation water as supplied is more than what would have gone to the sea without fallowing. However, we feel continuing to put good water into the Salton Sea, especially in the year of drought, is just a foolish use of water. It is time that we feel to stop studying the Salton Sea. We've studied it for decades. It's time to do something about it. It's critical to our crops, our livestock, our land, and our residents in the Imperial Valley that we are protected from any further damage or contamination caused by windblown dust due to a lack of action by the state of California. Farmers in Imperial Valley have stepped up to the plate to meet all of the obligations as set by the QSA. They have shown proactive steps to conserve water, and they continue to use our water supply in the best, most beneficial use that we can. However, the same cannot be said by the state. You have not lived up to your obligation as promised in the QSA documents and supportive legislation as well. Imperial County is very unique. I know we were talking about this last night. A lot of people say they're unique. Imperial County is very unique. We are in a position that few others are in. We do not have one single state or federal elected official that solely represents our area. Therefore, the people of Imperial County, we have to speak out, and that's what we're doing here today. There is no secret at all that our county has not seen eye to eye when it comes to QSA matters, and you know that. However, today we are here together, all of us, farmers and ranchers, business owners, elected officials, mothers and fathers and children, all to protect our Imperial Valley. And Imperial County Farm Bureau supports this petition, and we ask that you take action immediately. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Morgan.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Wheeler Morgan, president of the Imperial Valley Vegetable Growers Association, and bear with me because I've put a lot of lines through my speech today to
For that effort.
cut it short. IVVGA was founded in 1968 as an organization that represents growers, shippers, and service providers whose businesses are involved in the growing and shipping of vegetables in the Imperial Valley. While our organization addresses many issues, our focus in recent years has been food safety, labor, and of course water. I am pleased to be a fourth-generation farmer in the Imperial Valley, and aside from the 4 years I went to college, I've lived in the Imperial Valley my whole life. I'm here today on behalf of the Veg Growers Association to support the efforts to find a viable and reasonable solution to the looming crisis at the Salton Sea. I farm directly south of the sea, and along with many of my peers, I farm ground that is not only within a few miles of the Salton Sea, but ground that actually borders the sea itself. As the sea has slowly receded over the recent years since the adaptation of the QSA, I have become well aware of the consequences of the drop in water levels through firsthand experience by having already seen crop damage from dust high in salinity blowing off newly created shoreline onto adjacent lettuce crops, and I have a good understanding as to what those consequences will mean to the livelihood of our industry. Almost 1/3 of the vegetable and melon crops produced in the Imperial Valley are grown in the area between the shoreline and no further than 5 to 10 miles from the shoreline just south of the Salton Sea. This area produces an estimated $290 million of crops on 40,000 acres, both conventionally and organically grown, all just within a few miles of the Salton Sea. That acreage represents thousands of jobs employed directly or indirectly in agriculture. I know that any given day during our harvest season, there are at least a couple thousand people outside working in close proximity to the Salton Sea, myself included. Without a solution to the declining levels of the Salton Sea, those individuals are in harm's way. Those effects and whom they'll affect have already been mentioned, so I won't go further into them. Along with health issues to those working and living in the area of the exposed shoreline, there are also food safety issues to be considered as well. Our farmers and shippers have invested time and money to develop food safety standards, and we are proud of those standards, which represent some of the highest in the nation, all done on a voluntary basis. We test for foreign matter and pathogens like E. coli and salmonella in our harvested food on a parts per million basis, all to assure the safety of those who consume our product. The impact from the increasing exposed playa will certainly create dust particles which not only carry salinity levels that damage our crops, but will contain other particulates and potential pathogens that threatens the safety and quality of the food we produce for the consumer who eats it. The impact will be first for the acreage nearest the sea, but will grow as the sea recedes and the wind carries those particles beyond the Imperial Valley to adjacent areas. Without a solution soon, jobs for the future generations of farmers and those who support the industry will be lost for all the reasons I've mentioned. The local ag industry is already losing young generations to careers that are seen as less trying and more prosperous. We should do what we can to eliminate this trend. After all, farmers are the original environmentalists and stewards of the land. We currently are growing an increasing amount of our foods organically and becoming more sustainable in our practices every day. And as stewards of the land, we want to do everything we can in our area to keep our fertile soils producing the foods that not only feed our country but feed the world. That to me sounds much better than moving towards an environmental wasteland like many we've seen throughout history. Each of you has the ability to preclude a repeat of the Dust Bowl, albeit on a smaller scale, but nevertheless a Dust Bowl. Inaction is not an option. It is time for action, as the state of California has already pledged in the past. Too much time has gone by without a thing done to mitigate the effects of the QSA on the Salton Sea over the long term. Bring all the QSA parties together for a solution and require one that is reasonable, that can be funded, and addresses the looming economical, environmental, and health impacts. It is time for action. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Madam Chair, members of the board, guests, I want to thank the State Water Resources Control Board for conducting this hearing. I think it's well overdue. My name is David Villarino Gonzalez. I head up the Farm Worker Institute of Education and Leadership Development. It's a 501c3 nonprofit organization that was founded by Cesar Chavez in 1978 in order to strengthen rural communities. Our purpose here today is to demonstrate support for IID petition. I was struck during the lunch break when I went across the street. There's a park there that's dedicated to Caesar. And it reads in part, capital and labor together produce the fruits of the land. But what really counts is labor. These human beings torture their bodies, sacrifice their youth, and numb their spirits to produce this great agricultural wealth. A wealth so vast that it feeds all of America and much of the world. And yet the men, women, and children who are fresh, who work on this, who produce this production, often do not have enough to eat themselves. Cesar Chavez, 1979, in Imperial Valley. Members of the board, our economic system of grow or die and our rural culture, principally Latino culture, which relies on compatibility and sustainability, are now at war. What our economic system needs to avoid collapse is unfettered growth, water. What the environment and what the cultural system needs is a collaborative use of resources. Only one set of these rules will lose, and it's not the laws of nature. And thus we have an impending catastrophe that's before us now, and we're asking you to take action quickly. Because this issue is not about social, political, and cultural changes. It's not about reasonableness. It's not about seriousness. It's not about splitting differences. And it's not about getting overly excited about anything. We need to think radically different for change to be remotely possible. There are a number of points that I just want to remind people. That historically, the life expectancy of farm workers has been 49 years of age. In the 1970s and the early 1980s, the United Farm Workers under Cesar Chavez pushed very hard. There was a fight in the fields in order to address some of these cultural issues. And without the restoration of the Salton Sea, tens of thousands of the workforce, farm workers, and their families' health are again going to be subjected to increased risk due to the blowing particles and contaminants. In terms of economic development relative to self-sufficiency, historically, the economic sector of rural communities, about 75% is labor-intensive agriculture, including mining, extracts, construction, tourism. All of these predominantly are endeavors that use low skills or non-skills. The workforce preparation usually requires this high school diploma at best, and maybe some college. But the ability to expand our economic opportunities to other sectors largely depends on education and training of future workforces. And in the mitigation that took place, very little took place. Very little effort was placed and resources were placed in that area. Including in the possibilities, however, if this can be resolved, small manufacturing, transportation, logistics, high tech, the biofuels, wind, solar, hydrothermal. With the retirement of the boomers, we have to remember that with the retirement of the boomers over the next 20 years, This will require a stable and reliable workforce. And the future of our workforce, these young students who saw here today, is who are going to replace us as boomers. The replacement workforce is Latino. Without the restoration of the Salton Sea, we're going to be unable to avail ourselves and themselves to this economic opportunities. In terms of economic justice, in 1970, during that fight in the fields, it was all about a vision. What are our rural communities going to be looking like? And since the 80s and 90s, huge increases in per capita occurred all throughout the state, but not in Imperial County and not in eastern Coachella Valley. Native Americans, Hispanics are slowly beginning to climb out and begin to enjoy the fruits of self-sufficiency in some of these rural parts. But we need your help. The State Water Resources Board should move expeditiously forward in a manner for restoration of the Salton Sea that resolves the farm worker communities in conjunction with agriculture, and resolve these concerns regarding health, economic development, and the environment. I want to thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any questions for this panel? Thank you very much. Very well said. Next is a public health panel. We've already heard from Andrea Vallejo, but next will be Brad Poirier, APCS, huh? There you go. Imperial County Air Pollution Control District, and Afshan Nuri Baig, a medical director at Clínica de Salud.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Do we have our second win yet? All right. My name is Brad Porres. I'm the Air Pollution Control Officer for Imperial County. It's one of the 35 air districts in California. We're located in El Centro, California, and I've worked there for the past 21 years in many capacities. And as of late, I've been there for 7 years as the Air Pollution Control Officer, and I've been involved with the Salton Sea issues the entire time, it seems like. So bear with me as I try to scribble through my notes and make this shorter as well. Many of you with your air quality background know it's kind of difficult to scratch, figures and stuff out of air quality, but I'll do my best.
It is pretty cerebral some days, even though it goes to the core of public health. It's an interesting
Absolutely.
juxtaposition.
The Air District's primary mission is protecting public health by reducing air pollution through a range of programs. These include implementation of local, state, and federal regulations, voluntary incentive programs, promotion of clean, healthy transportation alternatives, and also public education. And as you heard today from some community members, that's a key component that they feel is lacking. And we strive to do our best, as well as other local agencies, as well as state agencies. I want to thank you for the opportunity to come before you today, and appreciate you all taking grasp of this issue and having this petition hearing today. I really appreciate that. We're here in support of the IID's petition, and we are an indispensable party and stakeholder with respect to this issue being discussed today, and we want to continue to be part of that process for as long as it takes to get this rectified. Imperial County continues to be challenged by air quality issues that create negative health impacts for people living in Imperial and Coachella Valleys. The geography for Imperial Valley also poses challenges to attaining helpful air quality. Imperial Valley is below sea level, including all of its major urban cities, as well as the center for the Salton Sea. Due to this fact, dust and other airborne pollutants have a tendency to hover in our air. The impacts are not limited to Imperial Valley and will impact the greater Southern California area. And as you heard many times today, the big burp, the H2S smell and odor. As many of you know, also particulate matter can travel the same distance, if not much greater distances. We're talking only 150 miles to San Fernando Valley for the odor smell, where particulate matter has been documented. It's going hundreds, if not thousands of miles. So we do have something more, not just a localized issue here. We have a regionalized issue here. The Air District has significant interest in protecting public health. The Air District is the sole statutory authority responsible for compliance with the Federal and Clean Air Acts in Imperial County, including the southern portion of the Salton Sea. The Air District is required under the California Health and Safety Code to develop state implementation plans known as SIPs and rules so that areas within its jurisdiction will attain and maintain federal and state ambient air quality standards. And many of you know from your past history that developing a state implementation plan is no simple effort. It's very arduous and time and resource intensive. So I'm sure you can appreciate what we have to go through to try to clean our air.
It's even harder than a FIP.
It is. The QSA plan was for the state to pay for restoration mitigation. Instead of burdening Imperial and Coachella Valley residents, the state board reserved continuing jurisdiction in order to make sure there is sufficient mitigation. With the mitigation water ending in 2017, it is time for the State Water Board to revisit this issue and really play a leadership role here. The QSA water transfers are causing impacts at the Salton Sea, and you've heard several numbers going across the gamut today, and I'm going to throw a couple more at you. If the sea continues to decline the way it's been projected in hydrology models, by the year 2047, potentially 86 square miles will be exposed. And to give you an analogy of what that would be, that's the size of the city of Sacramento. When the state water, excuse me, I'll skip around a little bit here. Also, when the State Water Board approved the order back in 2002, the QSA was expected to expose 16,000 acres of playa by 2077. However, recent modeling analysis shows that from 2011 to 2047, a conservative estimate is 55,000 acres of playa will be exposed as a result of the QSA water transfers, instead of the 16,000 acres the board had originally based their determinations on. Mm-hmm. The QSA water transfers are causing increased air pollution. Federal and state ambient air quality standards are established at levels necessary to protect the public's health. The 24-hour National Ambient Air Quality Standard for PM10 is 150 micrograms per cubic meter. The Air District is currently designated by the US EPA as a serious non-attainment area for PM10, which is the worst designation possible. This designation requires the most stringent levels of controls on significant sources of dust. The evidence now shows that the QSA water transfers will now cause more severe air quality impacts than the State Water Board originally thought. IID Salton Sea Air Monitoring Network confirms that exposed Salton Sea playa is a significant new source of PM10 emissions and will affect the attainment status of the entire Imperial County. Since 2010, monitoring data at the Salton Sea shows that the federal standard has been exceeded 21 times and the state standard 291 times, which is about 1 in every 3 days. The Air District estimates the QSA-caused exposed playa at the Salton Sea has the potential to create an additional 70 tons a day and over 25,000 tons a year of PM10 to our emissions inventory. This is going to be something that is going to be unfathomable to have to address. The result of all this is the Salton Sea will become the single largest PM10 source in Imperial County, likely surpassing Owens Lake as the largest PM10 source in the nation. And as mentioned earlier, even with mitigation at Owens Lake, they continue to record extremely high levels of PM10, in one instance over 138 times the federal limit. Keep in mind the Salton Sea is approximately 350 square miles, is more than 3 times larger than the Owens Lake, which is approximately 110 square miles. We know from history of Owens Lake that it is extremely costly to control PM10 emissions. The mitigation costs will be in the billions of dollars, which is why it makes more sense to restore the sea and be proactive instead of reactive. And I'll try to rush through a couple more of these. The county will face sanctions if the Air District cannot meet air quality standards. If there is no action and the APCD cannot come up with a state implementation plan that's approvable by the state of California or the federal EPA, then what they can do is apply sanctions to Imperial County. The first sanction is offset ratio will be increased, which will basically relegate Imperial County as not being able to have any growth. So all the economic impacts we're talking about could be elevated and multiplied time and time again, because we will not be able to create additional economic resources in Imperial County. Also, the second sanction would be withholding of federal highway funds, and many of those federal highway funds are necessary to pave poor roads that we utilize, which is also a large source of emissions in every air district's emissions inventory. So it's a double-edged sword there when we're talking about federal dollars for highways.
Can I ask a question? I realize that the time is running short, and I want to make sure there's in the absence, having lived through the Owens Valley Phase 1 discussion and knowing how incredibly bad that PM pollution was, I mean, it was the #1 health risk from PM in the nation at the time, which is why we stepped in and threatened a FIP. We didn't end up having to do a FIP, but we threatened a FIP, which is the best way to do a FIP. I just want to say they are not painful.
Forgive me if I shrink down when you say FIP.
I'm sorry. Yeah, no, there's nothing like that. That's, Jim Boyd, if you don't have a FIP or a SIP, you got ZIP. But in the absence of the QSA, and we're focused here on both our order and our role, but also a vehicle for just elevating and airing the issues that can be addressed in any number of ways. In the absence of all that, let's say there was the transfer, it just happened, we're not talking about our levers, and you're just coming in as the APCO, just as the the air district in Owens Valley stepped in.
Great Basin.
Great Basin, sorry. What would you go after?
Well,
who would you do a SIP on?
Who would I do a SIP on? Yeah. Basically, the first step would be identifying your source. So if the source was actually the Salton Sea, then you have to model for the emissions that are potentially coming from there. That designates if it's a significant source or not. Then you have to go after, and in our analysis, what you would have to go through is see who the ownership of the properties are. Many other areas throughout California still implement back measures, and many of those fall back down to the landowner. But it's dependent upon if it's landowner or operator, and in our particular cases, what we've gone through in our rule development was what caused those. Who's responsible for that cause, and which is actually what's being debated a little bit here today as well.
No, it's good, but yeah.
But it makes it very difficult without having those other steps in place, which is why one of the mitigation measures that the irrigation district is successfully and continuing to do right now is they've established their air monitoring network so that you can start getting a baseline of what the emissions are up at the sea. That's going to be critical for my agency as we move down and we start seeing these elevated readings, and are going to be required to do a state implementation plan. We're going to have to include emissions from the Salton Sea, and my fear is that if we don't appropriately address those, then all the efforts that we had done the last 20 years, all the improvements and the reductions we made from other sectors of our county are going to be overburdened, and they're going to be washed away.
Overrun.
Well, and speaking of inventory, the inventory slide that San Diego had, that showed 4% Salton Sea and QSA Salton Sea 17%. Now, what you just went through was the expectation that there would be exposed PIA initially of 16,000 acres, and now you're saying it's more likely to be 55. So I'm just wondering, have you seen this chart? Do you agree with it?
Well, I don't agree with it, and it was the first time I saw it today when the gentleman put it up there. Our basic tons per day is about 293 tons per day, and if we're adding based on 55,000 acres of exposed PIA, another 70 tons per day, then you're talking about an increase by a quarter, about 26% more to our daily load.
Mm-hmm. And then of the other sectors, on agriculture, do you have mitigation measures that through BMPs?
We actually do. We have a specific rule that is for agriculture, which is similar to what San Joaquin has. It's our 806 rule. And as a matter of fact, our State Air Resources Board was instrumental in helping us develop and approve that rule, and it actually got approved by EPA subsequently. There's no source exempt from dust control anymore.
Interesting. Thank you.
Wow, we jumped all over there, sorry.
Sorry.
So maybe I'll just, I have much more, but maybe I'll just go so I
Get
can
closer
save my
to
colleagues some time. So
Yeah.
in terms of the next step, the Air District recommends that the State Water Board positively and proactively act on the IID's petition, because as you heard, there's no more time. And if I was the best planner in the world from an air perspective, it's going to be monumental for me to try to address this. So we need to act now and hopefully avoid being reactive and dealing with something that has already happened and impacted our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. Hi, good afternoon.
Perfect.
And thank you for the opportunity. And my role in the Imperial Valley is that I'm a pediatrician. I am also the Chief Medical Officer for Clínicas de Salud, which is a federally qualified health center, the only health center, federally qualified health center in Imperial Valley. And we have clinics in Imperial Valley as well as in Eastern Coachella Valley. And we have served for the year 2014, we served 56,000 people and provided more than 200,000 visits to them. In addition to that, I am the chairperson for the local health authority, which was created by our Board of Supervisors. And my most important role in all of this is that I am a mother of an asthmatic and wife, and most recently I have started using bronchodilators. So that's my experience. But I'm here today to kind of support everything that has been said by my colleagues from the Imperial Valley, from Eastern Coachella Valley, but also as a reminder to not forget the human element. It is very, very important to keep the people in mind that are being affected. And I don't know what your personal experience has been with asthma, but if you can imagine that running in place for 2 minutes till your heart is beating very fast, and then trying to breathe through a straw and with your nose closed. That's how people with asthma feel when they're having a bad attack. In the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I've had 10 admissions, and out of that 8 were asthma-related admissions, hospital patients, ranging from 8 weeks to 13 years. So, and pediatrics runs up to 21 years of age. So I've seen the whole gamut of ages that are affected with asthma. We know, I mean, everybody knows that if the wind is blowing, all the asthma kids are going to come in. We know that we're going to see allergies. We know we are going to see eye infections. We are going to see exacerbations of skin rashes. So it's a given. From our own personal data, we know that we have more asthma patients that are seen in Brawley and in El Centro versus Calexico, which is at the southern end of the valley. One of the things that I am really involved in is workforce development. And so I do want to remind people that when we are having multiple hospitalizations, having people exposed to hypoxia, which is low oxygenation levels, there has to be a long-term effect. So I'm saying to you is that when we are talking about workforce development, we are already shortchanging people and their ability to have a quality of life that they otherwise would have had the potential for. We know from research that the Imperial Valley, go back a step. Imperial Valley was populated by people that emigrated west because of the conditions that were happening in the 20s. And also people that have emigrated north from the south to improve their quality of life. Basically, that was the reason how the Imperial Valley was created. If you see historic, they made roads over the sand with using the train plywood for tracks. So they struggled very hard to come to the Imperial Valley and make a life for themselves. Research has shown that recent immigrants from the south come in with better health, which goes down dramatically in the first 10 years. And that is because of the access to care and their hard work and their hardworking conditions that they're exposed to. We know that already. We know Imperial and Eastern Riverside County are one of the poorest areas in California with poor access to limited health care. So we have limited health care, and they can't even come to it. Even if I keep the clinic open, they can't come. We know we have poor air quality. And a question was raised if the presenter thought that it was urgent. And I would put to you, as a doctor, that you do not put a patient in the ICU before trying to resuscitate it. You emphasize preventive care. So this is way past urgent. We are headed for the ICU. We know the cost of providing care for patients with asthma, and we can extrapolate the cost of increasing cost of providing care and lost wages in the future. We know asthma is a chronic disease, which will impact not only the patient's life, but everyone in that family. As I'm trying to recruit professionals to the Imperial Valley, I hear the question about work-life balance. What about the work-life balance for people that are already there? This is a very emotional issue for us as providers of healthcare, because we can only try to take care of the people. And it's on your hands to actually make some responsible decisions that will impact the lives of the people that are counting on you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Next we have Lowell Sutherland, Council, Farmers Association for Responsible Mitigation, Enforcement, Remedies, and Solutions. Farmers. Farmers. How clever.
I claim authorship. Madam Chairman, members of the board, my name is Lowell Sutherland. I represent 8 second and third generation Imperial County farmers. They farm about 30,000 acres in the Imperial Valley. And one of the things I would like to address is the invitation that the board made to suggest changes to WRO 2002-2013, and I've quoted a provision of that, which you see in the slide. That's 6.3.8.2. And at that time, the then board, and this goes back to 2002, made a finding that emissions were not proven and that there was not going to be a significant problem because of the inflow to the sea that the IID was to put in to improve salinity. That prediction has proved wrong. And in the invitation as to what should be changed, that should be changed, and there should be a present finding, that this is a present matter and it is a presently serious matter. Mr. Cohen spoke, and his report actually appears on the website of the Salton Sea page of the Department of Water Resources, and it's quoted at length there. He's just summarized it. But you really should look at the whole report, and the thing that struck me is that his findings were that there would be 800 pounds of exposed, 800 pounds of particulate matter for each exposed acre of playa. And of course, as the exposure increases, the number of pounds of particulate matter increases. And this is his finding as to what's going on today. And I agree that this is a matter of urgency today. This is not something that we could wait until 2017 to solve, because in 2017, we fall off of the edge of the world. We fall off of the cliff. Things really start to go bad.
Not an elegant design.
Yeah, and in 2017, we're talking about the fish and the birds as well as the current air quality problems. So the suggestion that the IID has made is that the order be changed to provide that there be no more delivery of water if there's no mitigation. In short, no mitigation, no water. That will bring a very rapid solution to the problem. If the state doesn't step up, and somewhere I believe the state has to believe that they want this thing to succeed, if the state doesn't step up and fund the mitigation that's necessary, I think that you'll find some of the other stakeholders, San Diego County Water Authority, Metropolitan Water District, and CVWD may have an interest as stakeholders to step up and see that the funding is available. Because it's an urgent matter, because it's something that's urgent, the board should take an extreme measure and say, we're going to give you a chance, but not years, not half years, maybe a couple of months. We're going to give you a chance. Come up with the funding, or we're going to order that no more water be transferred until the funding is achieved. And that it's irresponsible to continue to expose more playas when you know what that particulate matter is doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're now going to take a 10-minute break, and then we'll resume our comments. But before we do, I wanted to say something, because I'm going to have to leave because I have to get to a memorial service, so it's not something I can change, and I would rather that I got to stay with you. But I just want to thank everyone for coming, for your thoughtfulness and eloquence, and it's been very sobering, very motivating and inspiring, and we will have to sit down and look at all of our options and alternatives, and we'll mull it over with our staff, and we will decide what we can and will do. But for today, just taking it in, the sort of quality of your thought, really, it has been really impressive. And I, having spent a lot of time on Salton Sea and related issues, been taking it all in and have found it a very valuable conversation. And I will listen to the tape of the rest of the proceedings when it's available to me and when I return. So thank you all very much. I will leave the chair in my capable vice chair's hands, and I look forward to working with you all and to listening to the rest of the hearing when it's available to me. And again, my apologies for having to go. I have no option. So thank you. What? 4 o'clock, but really 4 o'clock.